Dumelang, welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, why did the Chief of the South African National Defence Force, General Rudzani Maphwanya, make political statements during his visit to Iran? He met with Iran's army commander and they both agreed that the two countries shared a common goal of fighting global arrogance and aggressive colonial approaches. Iranian media reported that the general said that his visit carries a political message from South Africa. He spoke about the Israeli actions in Gaza, the ICJ case, among other issues. Now, the Department of Defence, which he's part of, and the Department of International Relations have distanced themselves from his statement, saying that matters of South Africa's foreign policy and international relations are the sole prerogative of the President and DERCO. We speak to the Department of Defense and a former Army General tonight. And then later, what is it going to take to resolve the tensions that have been ongoing between e-hailing drivers and taxi operators? The tensions appear to have now culminated in one person being killed this week in Soweto and two being injured after e-hailing vehicles were attacked at Maomela Mall in Soweto. The community now feels unsafe. Residents are saying violence between taxi operators and e-hailing drivers has become unbearable. We speak to both the taxi operators and a representative for e-hailing drivers. But first, my comment. So there are angry residents in Soweto this evening who are threatening to shut down Maomela Mall for 7 days until its management comes up with a solution to protect shoppers, e-hailing drivers, and everyone really who visits the mall. One person was killed this week and two were injured after an e-hailing vehicle, in fact it was vehicles that were attacked at that mall. Preliminary reports suggest that the incident is allegedly linked to tensions between taxi operators and e-hailing drivers. Earlier today, the residents blocked off Chris Honey Road, not allowing anyone in or out of the mall. This is what one of the e-hailing drivers had to say.
The voice of the people must be heard as from today. We're saying the MMC and the MMC of the public transport, they must come and intervene in this situation. We're going to stay here for as long as we want until we get a solution. We're saying the mall is not going to operate until the demands of the people they are being met. The Uber drivers, they are people, they are feeding families, and they've got the right to operate a business like South Africa.
The residents are saying that this violence between taxi operators and e-hailing drivers has become unbearable and they're now demanding action within 7 days.
We have said to the taxi industry, we have said to STS, Maomela, STS does not have the right to choose for us. And STS must stop what they are doing. So we're saying to yourself, let's allow Maomela Mall to operate. We are sitting down. The taxi industry must go. Maomela, the taxi industry must go. That's what you're saying. You're saying ICS must go.
Now, the tensions between e-hailing drivers and taxi operators has been ongoing for a while now. Government says it's going to intervene.
The way forward from here is for us as a department to call all of them and find ways of structuring them properly, because really they will not win anything. You should know this started in 2011. It came as a disruption to a long-standing service, and we also have said to the taxi industry, there's a need to modernize, but there's a need to make sure that we coexist. So that is the challenge we're dealing with now. We are confident we'll solve it. The challenge is what we discussed in platforms. We are discussing it with individuals who really don't take issues down to the structures. And it was evident here today that we've been sitting with wrong people in our meetings. Wrong people are the ones who write issues to us to say, address this, address this. And when we are trying to address, then there's others on the ground who feel the pinch and no one is talking to them.
Now, some residents have blamed the mall management for not doing enough to protect e-hailing drivers and their customers. The family of the deceased driver says that they're struggling to come to terms with the manner of his death.
He was so excited when he left KZN, like, Auntie, I'm coming. I got this car that I'm going to drive as an Uber, so things are going to come right for me. And then it starts, and then we get the news, and we're like, I didn't even know how to break it to his mother, because his mother worships the grounds he walks on. He's the only child. So I didn't even know how to tell my own sister that. I had to ask the neighbor. I didn't have the guts because I know how much she loves him. So for her to go, for him to just pass the way that it happened, we don't have a problem that it happened, but how it happened, that's the biggest problem here.
Yeah, the question we're asking you tonight is, what should government do to resolve this ongoing tension between e-hailing drivers and taxi operators? What do you think is the solution here? You can send us a WhatsApp voice note on 078 459 1897 to share your thoughts with us. Remember to tell us your name and your surname and where you're sending the voice note from, and please keep it at 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. We'll be back after the break. Let's start here. The SANDF Chief Rudzani Maphwanya has received widespread rebuke from government following reported political and policy statements made during his meeting with the Iran Defense Force leadership. The presidency says senior military officers should not engage outside of their military purview, and they do not represent the country on foreign policy matters. Let's start this conversation with Onica Kwakwa, who is the spokesperson for the Minister of Defence and Military Veterans, who joins us now via video link. Onica, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening. Onica, I think you are muted.
My apologies. Good evening, Clement, and good evening to the viewers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. What is the Minister of Defence's reaction to these statements that have been made by the Chief of the SANDF?
I must say, Clement, the Minister was as shocked as South Africans. Not that the Chief of the SANDF is in Iran. We Minister approved the trip. That's what we do when we engage with other states. We exchange visits, but for the Chief of the SANDF to enter the terrain of foreign policy and international relations, the Minister said that it was very unfortunate. And
has the Chief of the SANDF explained why he dabbled in politics during this trip?
Not yet. Minister is supposed to meet with the Chief of the SANDF. The meeting was supposed to take place today, but Minister is also grappling. She sits in the IMC for the national dialogue of the convention that is starting tomorrow. So Minister has been engaged in meetings, but this is very urgent, and the Minister will ensure that the meeting takes place as soon as possible so that this matter can be laid to rest.
What was the purpose of his trip to Iran?
Firstly, let me indicate that it was a visit. South Africa and Iran as a defense cooperation or bilateral relations started back in 1996, and we continue to engage on a number of activities that are informed, of course, by the MOU that was signed in 2016 that involves the programs like your military health exchange programs and other trainings, including technology and so forth. So the delegation of Iran was here 2 years back. They were also here during the AAD. They then met also with the minister during the courtesy visit at the AAD. They've extended the invitation for the Chief of the SANDF to visit their country, and the trip was supposed to take place last year. It couldn't because there were a number of activities, and the trip was only approved the past few weeks to take place last week.
So
this week rather,
yeah, and of course it's not just the Minister of Defence who's distancing herself from these political remarks, but it's the Department of International Relations as well, because it's their purview. They are the custodians, really, together with the President of Foreign Policy. So the question then becomes, given the tensions that exist between South Africa and the US right now, I mean, obviously government wants everybody to be as cautious as possible so that the relationship is not worsened. When the minister approved this trip, was she not concerned at all about what is going to be discussed and what the parameters need to be to avoid an escalation of tensions between South Africa and the US?
It is not even really about considering, of course, we're always considerate of the geopolitics, but the trip, just like all the other trips that we undertake as the defense, it is mainly and purely military to military.
Yeah.
So we will then be informed. The engagements will always be informed by the MOU or the bilateral cooperation that we enjoy with a particular state, and in this case, Iran. So it's always clear. I mean, we always prepare packs for them. This will be the speaking notes, the engagements. That is why we are shocked as a ministry, and we've also raised our disappointment with the utterances of the chief, because the like you're rightfully saying, that the foreign policy and issues of international relations are purely the purview of the president and DERCO.
The presidency said earlier today that President Cyril Ramaphosa did not approve this trip. And yes, the president doesn't get involved, obviously, in supervising the travels of the general. But he says that this visit was ill-advised, which then raises the questions around why the minister then approved it if President Cyril Ramaphosa believes that the trip itself was ill-advised.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we respect the view of the presidency that was raised today at the briefing, that according to Mr. Vincent, that the trip was ill-advised. But we were responding to an invitation, just like we respond to invitations from other states that we enjoy bilateral relations with.
Okay. Is disciplinary action being considered here, or even a reprimand? I mean, I don't know. In cases like this where someone makes political statements and the ministry distances itself, what normally becomes the process? Or are we jumping the gun here? The minister must speak to him first to hear his side of the story.
Yes, we can't preempt. We must also give the chief a hearing. And I believe that the minister will engage with the chief. And we've also had Mr. Vincent saying the president will also have an opportunity to engage. And I think we'll then inform South Africans what will be the course of action. But for now, we really must give the chief a fair chance of explaining why he felt the need to utter policy statements and political statements.
All right. Onica Kwakwa, thank you so much for speaking to us. She speaks on behalf of the Minister of Defence. She's the one who approved the trip. The presidency saying earlier today that that trip was ill-advised. Let's stay on this story and bring in the former SANDF Chief of Defence Intelligence, Maomela Motau, who also joins us via video link. Thank you so much, Mr. Motau, for also making time for us. Good evening.
Good evening to you and your viewership.
The comments that the chief of the SANDF has made, are coming during a time when there are heightened geopolitical tensions. There's not really much questions about the, of course, relations that exist between South Africa and Iran, but it seems like there is a big issue that's being taken around the comments that are political that he's made.
Let me start by saying that in the management of state, what we call statecraft, we should always understand that there will always be tensions. The tensions are not new, but also is the attitude which we should have. If we start, as I hear people talking, it sounds like they are making South Africa a vassal state, a state which must always obey or succumb to the whims of other states. South Africa cannot have its own policies. It cannot drive its own national security strategy. That strategy must be dependent on other people. I think that is very worrying as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't matter what is happening in the United States, where Britain, or so on and so on. That is the issue of our country to manage in relation to the entire world. Mm-hmm. We are members of SADC. We are members of BRICS, and we should understand the implication of being part of those international organizations. Yeah. We should manage those relations.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to
finish your point.
When it comes to the Chief of Defence, okay, and when it comes to Chief of the Defence Force, I don't think there's anything he did wrong. There's nothing wrong he did. The Chief of Defence Force is part of the defense strategy. He's a top person in the defense strategy. He is supposed to be a member of the National Security Council. The member of National Security Council knows what to say at all times. Now, I didn't hear anything extraordinary in what he said. He was saying what a Chief of Defence Force visiting a country should say. Mm-hmm. What did people expect him to go and say there, to go and drink coffee and come back?
Well, let's look at what he said.
All what he said.
Yeah, let's look at what he said. Yes. So the comments delved into the area of foreign policy, and that only is really the purview of the president and DERCO. They are responsible for that. So part of what he has said is that as the head of the military, he said that his visit to Iran carries a political message from South Africa. He went on to speak to Iran's army commander and said they both agreed that the two countries shared a common goal of fighting the, and I quote here, global arrogance and aggressive colonial approaches. So that they were slamming Washington, D.C., they were slamming Tel Aviv as well. So they discussed the war on Gaza. They discussed the ICJ case. I mean, when you are the leader and the chief of the SANDF and you are going there in that position, where do you get the authority to speak on policy issues like this?
Let me start by actually...
I think we've just lost Mr. Motau there. We seem to have some issues there with his network. We're going to try and see if we can re-establish that. Let's take a quick ad break, and when we come back, hopefully we'll be able to continue and conclude that conversation with Mr. Motau about these remarks that were made by the chief of the SANDF. Welcome back. Let's remind you of the question that we asked you earlier today around the happenings in Soweto. What should government do to resolve the ongoing tensions between e-hailing drivers and taxi operators? That's a question we're asking you tonight. We're going to be jumping into that conversation in a moment, but let's start with your tweets. Mohale says, hi Clement, the clashes between e-hailing drivers and taxi operators result from government's failure to enforce clear regulations. To resolve the conflict, it must either ban e-hailing or issue proper permits. An indecision only worsens the situation. Musima says, enforce strict laws to prevent these tensions between taxi operators and e-hailing operators. The department must give permits to both parties, and we need the public to decide on whomever transports us safely. Sidwell says, e-hailing service at malls is crucial for those who do not have vehicles and cannot be wished away. Government must stop issuing taxi licenses as there are just too many of them on our roads. Well, thank you very much for your tweets. We've got some WhatsApp voice notes that have also come through. Of course, the big question has been around the regulation and what government has done in as far as enforcing the law, but also having dialogue and trying to resolve these tensions, because they've been ongoing for a while. There have been meetings that have taken place before, but what have those actually produced in as far as solutions are concerned? Here's what some of you have said on the voice note line.
Good evening, is Tabiso Mohale Jacobzal Richie. The government should develop a framework which falls under Department of Transport, and they must implement that particular framework and regulation, because taxi drivers think that they own the road and that no one else can use the road in terms of making money. The government must be very, very strict in terms of that. Tango.
The government has failed us all in the taxi industry. I don't see anyhow they can resolve this. If they resolve that, it should be in the whole country, because what the government is doing in the taxi industry, giving permits or registering routes on top of other routes, that's where the problem is. And really, I personally don't see this being resolved.
Welcome back. Now, some Soweto residents say that they fear for their lives while using public transport due to increased violent attacks. In an attack believed to be linked to tensions between taxi operators and e-hailing drivers, an e-hailing driver was killed and his vehicle was set alight, while 2 others were shot and wounded at Maphwanya Mall in Soweto. Scores of residents continue to gather outside the mall, calling for the mall to remain closed for at least the next 7 days. Mandla Hermanus is the National Public Relations Officer at SANTACO, joining us via video link, and we've got Melithemba Mnguni in studio with us, who's the Secretary General of E-Hailing Partners Council. Mandla and Melithemba, thanks to both of you for making time for us. Let me start with you, Melithemba. What do you understand to have been the cause of this attack that we saw this week in Soweto?
Look, the details are not clear. Maybe let me start with the condolences to the Mvelase family, who have had our colleague being killed in a brutal way. We've seen the footage of the incident, which shows that this was an organized a crime, but we're not sure really what has happened. But all that we know is that there are tensions between e-hailing operators and the taxis at Maphwanya Mall. These are tensions that have been going on for the longest time possible. And because of that, there are assumptions to say this could be the taxi operators that have committed this. But you must mind that we've had a lot of incident. Actually, this incident catches the attention of many because cars were torched and it happened at Maphwanya Mall. But just recently, on Tuesday, we had a meeting with which was called by the station commander, where there's about 4 incidents of e-hailing drivers being killed. And the investigation shows that these are hits, nothing to do with robberies or anything. And again, in Soweto, we've had a lot of incidents around where e-hailing cars were broken, vandalized, broken windows, mirrors, and so forth. These are incidents that have been happening recently. So that is why there is this notion to point out at the taxi operators.
What are the core issues, especially around Maphwanya Mall? What is it that the taxi operators and you as e-hailing drivers are not seeing eye to eye on?
Look, the reality is that these are symptoms of underlying issues that are there within the industry. And the question that you were asking to say the role of government in making sure that there's no tension between the operators. The government has let us down. As I'm speaking to you as the e-hailing operators, we're organizing a protest march that we're taking to the MEC of Transport on the 19th because of dissatisfaction with our government. They've failed to make sure that there is coexistence between the operators. They have failed to regulate or to implement the regulations, because the regulations are there. As I speak to you, they have had this notion to our counterparts, the minibus taxis. You must understand that these are our fathers, our families. Most of e-hailing come from those. But they have failed to make sure that there is coexistence between the two.
Yeah.
And e-hailing, when it came to the country, it came without everyone waiting. But in 2016, what the government did was to regulate e-hailing through a practice note, recognizing them within Section 66, the meter taxis and the charter services. They are regulated within that. Now, there are issues that are raised by the taxi operators that are genuine, although we don't condone this what then happens.
Yeah.
Issues where they feel like e-hailing are not required to have these operating licenses, that they are subjected to themselves.
Yeah.
The issues around pricing, where they are saying there is unfair competition. You would have realized that recently we've seen Bajaj being introduced in our transport services. Currently we've seen Uber introducing, they call it Uber Motor, the scooters. These are services that keep coming. But if you look at Section 66, it is the responsibilities of the MECs and the municipalities to regulate, firstly, the services in terms of the categories, and secondly, the pricing. They are complaining that there is this unfair competition, hence the grievances that are there.
Okay, let's hear from the taxi industry. Mandla, let's bring you in here. I mean, as you hear, there are a lot of fingers that are pointing potentially at the taxi industry as possibly the people that are behind this particular attack. And of course, we don't know that conclusively. But from your point, what are the issues here? And what are the concerns that have been raised, especially around that area at Maphwanya Mall?
Thank you for having me. And I think as a starting point, we must convey our condolences to the family of the deceased. And we are saying one death is one too many. Whatever challenges that we might have, whatever tensions there might be between e-hailing operators and mainstream minibus taxi operators, nothing should result in the killing of a human being. So we condone that in the strongest possible terms, and we implore the law enforcement agencies to do everything in their power to arrest those who are responsible for this crime so that they can be brought to book. There have been instances where there are tensions between taxi operators and e-hailing. And these, in the main, happen because one of the challenges that we have is that when you are an e-hailing operator, you don't have a holding area where you wait for a chance to be able to load. So what we have seen is that these e-hailing operators, in some instances, they start to create some informal ranks around malls, you know. So you find in an instance where what we understand is that people are supposed to request via an app for a service, and then a vehicle must come around. But whilst that vehicle is waiting to be allocated a load, where does it sit? Where does that vehicle sit? As it were. So when they sit around malls and then you can see a group of them, what will then happen if there's also a taxi rank next to the very same mall? Then you will see the tensions where it almost seems like now there are two ranks. There is a rank for the meter taxi and a rank for your normal minibus taxis. I think that's one of the things that can cause tensions, because the advantage that the e-hailing guys have is that they can actually pull right up in front of the entrance to the mall. So they've got the advantage of being able to pick up passengers before they can get to a taxi rank, because when passengers have to use a taxi rank, they have to walk a number of meters to where the ranking facility is, as opposed to using an e-hailing service. But what we have also picked up is that some of the e-hailing guys, I don't know whether it's because of the way they are being treated by the owners of the applications themselves, they start touting for passengers. So in other words, they don't wait for a request to come via the telephone. They rather go into the malls and start touting and saying, there's an Uber here, do you want an Uber? And that creates tensions. And we understand why they might be doing that, because when they do that, then all the money that they get from that passenger comes to them. Whereas if it's a booking via the app, then there's a huge percentage that goes to the company that owns the app. So we feel those are some of the challenges that we need to tackle as we sit down with our colleagues, because we really have to coexist, because there's a market for e-hailing that does not necessarily takes away from your normal traditional minibus taxi operations.
Yeah, and I mean, from earlier today, some residents were complaining that they have been harassed. I mean, people who have legitimately called Ubers on their apps, and they're coming from their homes, they're coming to shop at the mall. They have been harassed. There have been cases where they're told to leave the vehicles, cases where the Uber drivers or e-hailing drivers are not allowed to drop them off near the mall. How do you address that concern? Because some of the residents, that's why they were chasing away some taxis earlier in the morning today, because they said sometimes it's you that are actually forcing them to get into the taxis, when in fact it's their right to choose whether they want to use an e-hailing or a taxi.
Absolutely, no one has a right to tell anyone which mode of transport one has to use. People are free to decide whether they want to get onto a bus, onto a train, onto a taxi, or use e-hailing or metered taxis to get to wherever they need to get to. But what we need to come up with is a way. First of all, we need to have a way of being able to say, when these things happen, who do you report to? Are you able to identify the association that is intimidating people, so that as SANTACO, together with the e-hailing association, then together with law enforcement as well, so that we are able to deal with these matters, because they do not happen on instruction from SANTACO, as it were. But there might be things like that that are happening at grassroots, but when we know about those, then that's when we are able to act, because then we will be able to hold whoever is responsible accountable. So there need to be a mechanism. That's why we need to sit together and say, okay, if we have a control room where we are saying, when these incidents happen, this is where you report, and in that control room, you've got SANTACO, you've got e-hailing, and you've got law enforcement. And I think that's one of the things that we can do to ensure that we tackle these issues.
How do we tackle the issues, Melithemba? Because part of what has been raised before is that e-hailing, there are those who believe is not properly regulated. When you look at the issue of pricing, that is also the biggest dispute, because sometimes the price that is being set is automated by the system, and sometimes the taxi drivers are saying, but even the issue of pricing, that's not regulated. The app can just decide that we're going to drop prices like this so that we get the bigger chunk of the market.
If you look at section 66, subsection 3, the powers are granted to the MECs to regulate the fare structure completely, including the invoicing and everything. Currently, the app companies have got what they call dynamic pricing, which does not reveal the details of how the system works. It's an algorithm that is controlled by them. And the MEC is supposed to regulate the pricing and gazette it. But that has not been done. It was only done in 2010. So these are some of the solutions that we are saying should be brought forward. Talking about the incident my counterpart has just mentioned, there is an issue of exorbitant commission that is being charged, where they are taking more than 40% of the fare that is paid by the customer, which then leads to some of the operators negotiating to say, no, Mr. Manyatela, can I take this trip off the platform? And these are some of the incidents that are happening. But coming back to the issues whereby we've got such incidents in Maphwanya Mall, where you've mentioned that e-hailings are not allowed to pick up and drop off inside. Like I said, the government is dropping the ball because it is not taking charge. When there is a void from the government, from law enforcement, people take law into their hands. So we should be having law enforcement. If ever e-hailing are doing anything illegal, it is the law enforcement that should be enforcing the law, not civilians. We should avoid that. We come back to the residents of Soweto. I was about on my way going home, coming from Maphwanya Mall. We left there, I think, around 6:30. We've been there the whole day. And whatever we tried to negotiate with the community, they could not accept it because of what they have gone through. Even when we came out and said, look, we have spoke as operators that we will work together. Said, but we've had that situation before. It never happened. It just on the talk, practically, we are not able to access e-hailing cars within the mall. We have to walk all the way out. Sometimes we are pulled out and so forth. So the residents are very angry with what is happening.
Yeah. Mandla, would you prefer, as the taxi operators, a coordination like what we see at the airports, where you've got e-hailing having designated areas? I mean, at the airport, there's a specific level where they can come and do their collections. Is that perhaps a structure and coordination that you think would be part of the solution?
It would assist. It would go a long way where there are designated areas for e-hailing. But having used the airports frequently, what I've also picked up is that even at the airports, you still have people who go around asking you get off the plane and into the general areas, and you've got people asking you do you want Uber, do you want Bolt, and so the touting happens even at the airports, even whilst the airports have dedicated spaces for e-hailing and metered taxis. But we think that would go a long way, having dedicated spaces where they know this is where we pick up and this is where we drop off, because also that will deal with the tension where minibus taxi operators feel like the e-hailing guys are poaching customers from them.
What is the MEC doing? I mean, you talk, Melithemba, about how you've been failed by those in power. That's the responsibility of the MEC to make sure that there's implementation of those regulations, there's enforcement as well. But it's almost like the government is so reactionary. So there has to be someone who dies or someone who's injured before they can act. Has the MEC said anything today? I know she was in Soweto. Are there any promises that are being made from the side of government to say this is how we're going to resolve this now?
Unfortunately not. Actually, that's what happened when we failed to address the community, because the MEC failed to understand the gravitas of the issue there and how the community are angry. Look, as I was saying earlier, that we've organized a protest march to the MEC. We've had to have a case against the MEC with Gauteng Provincial Legislature because of these failures. I speak with my counterparts. What he's mentioning, that is the understanding of the leadership on the higher level. But if you go on the ground there in Soweto, the people that are operating on the ground, they will tell you that they don't want e-hailing. They won't say, we understand e-hailing, and so they will tell you that we don't want e-hailing. They will tell you that e-hailing is illegal and what. That is the understanding that they have. Hence, we are saying the government has failed to cover the gap, has failed to bridge that gap between e-hailing operators and the taxi operators. We've got an issue around being organized as e-hailing. We've pushed very hard. We've had to go to the public protector for us to be organized. For example, the organization that I come from, to have a conference. When we had that conference, when the MEC came, that conference was supposed to be completed where there is other leadership structures within the regions of Gauteng and also sub-regions. Where there is that structure where in Soweto they are saying, look, in e-hailing, we don't have someone who is here in Maphwanya Mall who can address these issues where we're having others poaching and so forth. And as long as we don't have this, we will continue not having peace because we want this to happen. And when you look at those structures, they are only done by the government. Section 66, subsection 4. It is the MEC that needs to go through and organize those structures to be there so that each and every mod is able to work with each other. Like you were saying, my colleague, to say we need to have those committees to say within Maphwanya Mall, this is the office of e-hailing and the minibus taxis and the meter taxis collectively.
And issues can be addressed there if anybody has issues.
Level, exactly.
All right, let's look at some of the tweets that have come through as we, of course, look at what happened there in Soweto and what the potential solutions are. Let's start with Sabelo, who says, hi, Clement, government's inefficiencies and snail pace in regulating the sector puts us here. E-hailing can exist, but it must be controlled and vetted, integrated in the whole transport basket. Taxi industry must also stick to their roots and stop harassing even private motorists. Skumbuzo says the SANTACO and e-hailing should both understand that they are all private transport. The problem starts when one calls itself public transport as if the public owns it. Hector says mall management tighten security inside and out. Taxis stick to designated zones. People use them, but let the community choose e-hailing too. Taxi owners adapt. The business is evolving. Brian says our government is always caught up sleeping on duty. They should have regulated e-hailing a long time ago. They always wait for someone to be brutally killed, then come up with solutions. Government, rest in peace. That's Mthokozisi Mvelase. Yeah, thank you so much for your tweets. Let's look at some of the voice notes as well that have come through. And of course, the issue of mall management as well coming up again around what their responsibility should be here. Here's what some of you have said on the voice note line.
Good evening, Clement, and good evening to your viewers. Look, Clement, the taxi industry needs to be regulated. I don't know why government is tiptoeing around the issue of regulating the industry, because it's been an ongoing issue for years. For years, taxi violence has been ongoing for years, and it can't be that it's just falling on deaf ears. The government has to come on board and stop tiptoeing around the issue of regulating the industry, because for as long as the industry is not regulated, we'll always be faced with such criminal elements. What these people are doing is simply barbaric. To put it bluntly, it's simply barbaric. They need to be stopped. That industry needs to be regulated. Thank you.
Well, yeah, Mandla and Melithemba, thank you so much to both of you for making time for us. And I really hope that government can take up its role seriously and just intervene and not only be reactionary where people have to die and people have to be injured for them to come and do something and hold dialogues and speak to the different parties. The regulations are already there. Just do your job. Before we go, though, we would like to clarify a comment that was made by my colleague Oliver Dixon during Tuesday's program, which related to Gayton Mackenzie's past social media posts and the broader conversation around the race and language. Here's Oliver with more. And thank you for watching the Thursday edition of Face the Nation.
On this past Tuesday's broadcast of Face the Nation, where I stood in on the program for Clement Manyatela, I made a comment that may have suggested, may have presented as though Diane Kochlepan, a member of Parliament of the Democratic Alliance, was expelled from the party in 2015 for offensive language. She was in fact not expelled from the party for offensive language. She was suspended from the party and later reinstated after sharing a post on Facebook that called for the return of P.W. Botha, that suggested South Africa was better under apartheid P.W. Botha than it is under democracy. We at SABC News fully accept that she was not expelled from the party for using offensive language.